You're listening to London Greek Radio, and this programme has previously been broadcast, providing you with the opportunity to listen again to a show which you may have missed on LGR.
All right, so thank you for tuning in. Hello and welcome to All About Autism, our monthly charity show here on London Greek Radio, aimed at helping us to understand autism better so that we can create a better society for autistics and the whole autism community. My name is Dr Chris Papadopoulos, and I'll be your host for the next hour up until 8 o'clock. I'm a father of 2 autistic children. I'm the founder and lead of the London Autism Group charity, and I'm a principal lecturer in public health at the University of Bedfordshire. Today, I'm joined by my 2 lovely co-hosts and charity volunteers, Sophia Christophi, who is herself autistic, and Ellie Kolatsi, who is a parent of a young autistic child. How are you doing today, Sophia and Ellie?
Yep, fine, thank you.
Yeah, you having a good week?
Looking forward to hearing Georgia tell us more about sleep.
Yes, that's right, because today's topic is all about sleep, and we've got an amazing guest. Absolutely delighted that we have this wonderful guest here with us on the line in the form of Dr Georgia Pavlopoulou, who is a lecturer in educational psychology and counselling psychology at University College London. She's the founder of the Group for Research in Relationships in Neurodiversity, and an expert on many issues related to autism and neurodiversity, including particularly on the topic of sleep, which is the focus of today's episode. How are you doing today, Georgia?
Hello. It's very nice to be with you. I hope I don't put you to sleep. We're going to talk about sleep, but hopefully you're going to stay awake.
That will be our yardstick as to whether or not this is a good show or not. But yeah, no, it's great to have you here, Georgia. And obviously, sleep is a really, really important issue for the autistic community. I mean, it's an important issue for everyone. But unfortunately, the reality is that the autistic community face many sleeping-related issues and challenges. And as I said, sleep is so important for everybody. I'm sure everyone listening knows how important sleep is for our health and well-being. In terms of its impact on our physical health, a good night's sleep can help the body repair and rejuvenate itself. It can boost our immune system, and it can reduce the risk of illness. For mental health, sleep can reduce our stress and anxiety, and it can improve our memory and help with coping and resilience through the day, which we all need, especially these days. However, sadly, research does show that sleep-related problems are much more likely to occur among autistic people compared to the general population. So we're going to talk about why this might be the case and what we might mean when we say sleep-related problems. I mean, what exactly does that mean? So we're going to talk about that as the episode progresses. But let's just quickly touch on it now in a general sense. When I say sleep-related problems, I'm generally talking about difficulties falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking up too early. Is that right, Georgia? Is that how you would describe it?
Absolutely. Sleep, as you said, is so important for all of us, and it's enough just to miss 1 or 2 nights of sleep for all of us to see the impact it has on our appetite, on our mood, on how we relate with others in our family. For autistic people, it might mean that they might become even more sensitive in terms of their sensory system. You know what makes sleep so interesting? Apart from the fact that it's so important, it controls all of the things that happen to us when we're awake. We don't still know the exact reason why we need to sleep. Sleep remains one of the most enduring and intriguing mysteries in health science. Experts are trying to analyze how sleep works in terms to understand what happens to our body when we don't get enough sleep. So there are many studies that demonstrate that sleep is incredibly complex. It's a very dynamic thing. So while we think that nothing happens, there are many notable changes in our body while we sleep. It is important to recognize that what happens during sleep is very dynamic, and actually we're having many different multiple sleep cycles while we sleep. Each sleep cycle can last between 70 and 120 minutes. And that means that our body on each different cycle is doing different things. So, for example, we have 4 stages. In the first 5 minutes as we try to fall asleep, already we start breathing less. As we're transitioning to the second stage, we're further slowing the activity of our brain, our body. It's much easier to be awoken still because we're not very heavily sleeping. And as we move into stage 3, this is the deepest part, what we call non-REM sleep. And in that stage, our muscles are becoming very, very relaxed. Our body is very relaxed. Our brain waves are showing a clear pattern of slowed activity. And it is believed that the deep sleep is playing a very important role in recuperating the body as well as effective thinking and memory. So, when you think about autistic people and some of the difficulties that they might have, for example, with behavior, with regulating emotion, or with communication and using words, it's very important to think the sleep factor. We know that the way we speak, the vocabulary we develop is very much sleep dependent. And then we move into the stage 4, and at that stage, brain activity picks up significantly. Things are changing. Everything changes in the body except from the eyes and the breathing muscles. The rest is experiencing almost a temporary paralysis. And at that stage, that is very deep, in most cases, dreams can happen. Dreams can happen at any stage, but more commonly they happen at that deeper stage.
Wow, it's really, really fascinating, and I hadn't even thought, to be honest with you, Georgia, about the fact that, sleep is such a mystery. That's such an interesting thing that you said, that we still to this day don't really understand why perhaps sleep is so crucial for our health. But clearly there are these 4 stages and these cycles. So what exactly is a cycle? Is that the same as a stage, or is that its own thing?
Well, every stage is a cycle. That's a very good question. And that might look the same for most people. And that consists what we call our sleep architecture. And if that looks different, then we might have some sleep struggles. It's so important. We still don't know why we need to sleep that much, but we know that it detoxifies the body, it detoxifies the brain, it regulates our hormones. And if you think about it, scientists have calculated that we can sleep up to 1/3 of our life. So although we don't know why we do it, nature must be very wise, and we're doing it because apparently we really need it.
I imagine you're an expert in sleep, in actually sleeping as well, Georgia. Is that right? Or are you just an academic expert of sleep?
Well, academic life and family life can actually take a toll. And that means particularly while I was doing sleep research with autistic teenagers, I lost some of my sleep, I have to admit. And, it's okay. We can manage some days with less sleep, but actually in the long term, the physical and the mental development is affected. We are more at risk of cardiovascular problems. Our immune system gets weaker. We're at a higher risk of obesity, even of developing diabetes, as well as managing less well our stress and feeling more often depression or low mood.
It really is so crucial, isn't it? What do you think about that, Ellie or Sophia? Ellie, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it became really quickly that my son had problems sleeping. So he's a twin, and the sister liked to sleep in and he didn't. So it was just even the build up to going to sleep. He was anxious about it, falling asleep, not staying asleep and waking up. So as he developed his language, he was able to tell us that he was actually afraid of the dark. And that's where he found the difficulties in sleeping. So even before thinking about going to sleep, he would turn up the music, almost just distract and not go to sleep. And very difficult settling and sleeping. So, I mean, we're not a great sleep. I'm not a great sleeper, so I just kind of thought, okay, maybe that's just part of our kind of genetic makeup. So, I just thought, well, let's try and work with this as best as we can. But absolutely, I completely agree that sleep is so important to eating and thinking and your daily functioning. It plays such a big role in being able to function. So I know when he's not had enough sleep, because it affects his mood, his ability to communicate and eat. It affects everything for him.
Yeah. I think we have to prioritise it maybe a bit more, consciously as a society. You gotta get this in there. In the same way that we talk about, put your seatbelt on the car, or don't smoke. Those other essential things. Maybe we don't perhaps think of sleep in that way. We just take it for granted, or play around with it a little bit too much. Before we
can I also just say that as much as we tried the routine, some of it worked. We tried to be consistent. I've always had a routine, but with my daughter it worked. With him it didn't work. And talking about it with others, being able to find what works for you is really important, and not sort of think about what others are doing. So you've really got to kind of focus on what works and be consistent. So it might work one night, but also it might not work the other night, but also just kind of figure out what works. And
so before we talk more about your experiences, because as parents it is also can be very challenging when our autistic child or family member is really struggling. It's a sort of domino effect, isn't it? And that can have additional impact. But before we get into it, I just want to come back to you again, Georgia. Would you mind just telling us a little bit more about your background, so that our listeners can get a little bit more of a clearer sense about the work that you do, who you are, and so forth? That would be really nice.
Thank you so much. So my name is Georgia. I was born in Athens, and one of my favorite places to visit in Greece is in Peloponnese, Kalamata. I've been living here for the past 10 years, and I'm an educational and developmental scientist. My big interest is to understand more and to study about how people across the lifespan grow, learn, and connect with each other. I'm also practicing psychotherapist and counselor, and I also do research. My aim is to try to make a difference in the life of autistic people and their family members by doing research that has implications in improving access and involvement of autistic people with ADHD, their family members, to educational, healthcare, and mental health services. My inspiration to get into developmental science, research, as well as practice, it has been, for one, I have been inspired by so many people who are doing great things to make life better for people, and as well as the failures of the system that I have witnessed, particularly when I worked as a director in a mental health unit, where I saw how autistic people and their families, they didn't have access to talking therapies. Professionals wouldn't always believe the different issues that they would present. Parents would be blamed sometimes. And then as I started meeting autistic people, that was a massive inspiration for me as well. I knew I wanted to work with autistic people, do research with autistic people, as well as having more autistic friends and colleagues. Their humor, their kindness, their honesty, and the passion that they have around specific topics of interest, it's just so good. It's enriching my life. So I'm particularly interested in both research and practice to understand how we connect with each other, how neurotypical and neurodivergent people who are autistic or have ADHD connect with each other, and understand what can prevent us from being anxious or depressed, and the role of relationships. You said earlier, Chris, about, smoking or diet or safe driving. Our society is making lots of effort around these factors. They are well recognized. But when it comes to sleep, it's so automatic. It's like breathing. Not many people think about it. As well as relationships that are the forgotten, sometimes, foundation of good mental health. So I'm very interested in the ways we can connect with each other, and particularly for autistic people, how they can access the society, how they can feel that they belong. And accessibility and belonging focus is so relevant to any minority. I'm an immigrant, I'm neurodivergent, so these both are really big themes for me.
All right. Thank you so much for that. It's really fascinating. And thank you for all the amazing work that you're doing and the impact that you're having, Georgia. That's absolutely amazing. And I agree, the autistic perspective on all this is really, really important. So we've got Sophia here, and we'll come to her after the break and get her experiences and views on this. But I just want to remind our listeners that we'd absolutely love to hear from you. So if you've got any questions or points of view that you'd like to get across to us on air, please do text us, get in contact with us. Our phone number is 0737 661 1033. That's 0737 661 1033. Or you can send me directly a message on Twitter. My hashtag is @ChrisPaps, and I'll keep an eye on that. We'd really, really love to hear from you. And so, because we said that the autistic perspective is so important, which it always is, I'd like to first go to you, Sophia. I mean, what are your thoughts about this? Have you ever struggled with sleep yourself?
Yeah, sleep has been a lifelong problem for me. My mum says that I haven't slept properly since the day I was born, so it's been going on for quite some time. Going to sleep, staying asleep, all of those things are difficult. I have a lot of anxiety around sleep, and I think some of that is because, like you said earlier, this whole idea that sleep is still a bit of a mystery to scientists, that whenever I've tried to read books to better understand why we sleep and how we sleep, and there's not really a clear answer, the idea of going to sleep and kind of not being in control is really unsettling for me. So I kind of fight going to sleep.
Oh, that's really interesting. So part of it is the sort of submission of no control, letting go control.
Yeah, because I don't really understand how the whole process works, and nobody does, and that just makes me feel really odd. So
it's a shame, isn't it? Because, I guess the one of the main tricks to getting to sleep is to feel calm and relaxed, not anxious or worked up. And I guess if you're sort of thinking about trying to understand it or trying to control it, you're not letting yourself go, are you? You're sort of fighting it.
But then I think even if I was able to relax to that point, I'm also very sensitive to sounds in the house. So when I do go to sleep, I'm a light sleeper. If I hear the buzzing of the fridge or the heating kicks on, it makes that little clicking sound, that would wake me up, whereas other people in the house will sleep through that and much more. So there's the sensory consideration as well. I'm really particular about how pyjamas feel, things like that. So my mum probably dreads the yearly pyjama shop because we go around everywhere to find the perfect pyjamas, and then I'll buy 8 pairs of the exact same ones, wear them until they're falling apart, and then we have to start again.
That's quite common, isn't it, among autistic people, isn't it? Yeah, to sort of just buy whatever it is they need that they know works.
Bulk buy.
And
then when you go back to get some more, they've been discontinued, and it's you've got to start all over again.
But you're right, that is a major additional consideration, isn't it? The sensory things, I mean, the auditory, sensory sensitivities, and the touch,
so even how the bed feels, the pillows, it's trying to get comfortable.
Did you ever try a weighted blanket, or was that not what you needed?
No, I haven't tried a weighted blanket, but I've tried all the lavender sprays and everything else. My mum had a quite a strict routine for our bedtime when we were young, and I always used to think that, or when I was an adult and I could set my own bedtime, I wouldn't have any of these problems, but it's made no difference. Now I just sit there scrolling on my phone all night or reading book after book. But yeah, sleep has been a real challenge.
Right. What do you think, Ellie?
Yeah, no, I was just I'm agreeing with what you're saying, because I can see it with my son. But his pyjamas have to be right. He can hear a dog barking 3-4 roads away, and it's really faint to me, but obviously it's so loud for him. He says, "Why is that dog shouting in my ears?" So he can obviously hear it. So it's all the sensory stuff. I have quite a strict bedtime routine. It works for my daughter, but obviously we need to just be I allow him some autonomy and control over how he goes to bed. So he orders what he needs to order, like cards. We're not too keen on the loud music, but we're working on that.
Yeah.
But again, that's the distraction of going to sleep and facing letting go.
Yeah, so I've always had to perform like a lot of rituals before I go to sleep as well. So everyone's sitting down, I'm like going around them to straighten everything up and put things in their place and make sure that it all just kind of feels just right for me to be able to go to bed.
And has it been very difficult for you, Ellie, as a parent, when your son has struggled with his sleep?
Yeah, definitely. As I said before, I'm not a great sleeper either, so it's really hard to settle him. It's a little bit easier now that he can communicate that he is afraid of the dark, and we have a lamp and we try and think about things together, but definitely my sleep's been disturbed, and I actually don't know where I'm going to end up waking up, in whose bed. So whatever we can to get some sleep, we will do it, so not to distract the others in the household. So yeah.
So Georgia, if I can ask you a question about this, if you if you sort of wake up after an hour and you're awake for 20 minutes and then you go back to bed, back to sleep, do the stages reset, or do you just pick up from where you left off and continue?
It depends. So very naturally, at the end of every stage, your sleep might become lighter. You might even wake up, but most people are able to just continue sleeping. For some people, it just becomes difficult, and all the sleep stages will look slightly different as we at different stages of life. As it changes, our need to sleep, our body needs more or less sleep depending on the age. And there are some paradoxes here as well. So for example, teenagers, they tend to be night owls. They start waking up later. They like to stay until later as well at night. However, it's crucial for them to have 10 to 12 hours of sleep, but they don't tend to get nowadays more than 7 or 7.5, which can be problematic for some people.
Thank you for that, Georgia.
When people get anxious at night, the sleep might be broken. So we talk about sleep fragmentation, and that can be very, very tiring, and it does interfere the next day with our memory, with our mood. So if our sleep is smooth and our sleep architecture is typical, we are able to navigate through the different stages pretty smoothly without big interruptions.
So thanks for that. We have a question. We've got a text here from Andia. She's asked, what do we know about autistic people's sleep patterns specifically, and how they differ from neurotypical people? That's an interesting question. Is there any research on that in terms of the sleeping pattern, so to speak, for autistic people?
So there is lots of research. Mostly, there is research that is using objective or subjective different measures. There is research looking at their genes. It can be really individualized. There is some research that shows that autistic people might have different levels of melatonin, an hormone that is helping people to slow down and sleep. Some other parts of research might talk about autistic people actually having different sleep genes. But in all of this, we also need to remember that there's something about the daytime anxiety and pressures that people might have that might actually keep them awake at night. So it might not be you're not born with different genes or architecture necessarily, but you might develop sleep difficulties because it's just difficult to navigate a neurotypical world as an autistic person. You have a lifetime of potentially hiding that you're autistic, camouflaging, trying to manage with all the demands that you have around you, trying to fit in. And that is creating lots of pressure, and then it makes it very difficult at night to unwind the mind and sleep. Or you might go to bed and sleep and think of the day that you just had, or thinking and trying to plan the day that you're going to have the day after. So there are differences that could be in the genes or in the actual sleep architecture, but also it could be environmental aspects that are creating differences in the sleep patterns, as well as cognitive differences could be happening. So some people might not see it relevant to their lives. Some children particularly especially if there is a co-occurring learning disability. They might not see the necessity of going to bed and sleep at a specific time that the parents are telling them. There is ongoing research that is inconclusive about the fact that some autistic people might actually need less hours of sleep, or they might not have this monophasic type of sleep that, we tend to sleep at one time at night for many hours.
Thank you, Georgia. If you don't mind me just interrupting for a second, we've got another question that's come in. I'll read that out in a second, but you just mentioned something very important, which I think should be highlighted. Just very briefly, because we don't have too much time. What is melatonin? Because you mentioned that we, different people might have different levels of melatonin.
Yes. So melatonin, it does exist at different levels. Is a chemical and is an hormone that is helping us to fall asleep. So basically, it is produced in the brain in response to darkness. It helps with the timing of what we call our circadian rhythm. That is our internal clock, the internal clock that is telling us when it's time to sleep, when it's time to eat. So being exposed to light at night, according to some research, can actually block melatonin production, because we said that it's an hormone that is in response to darkness.
Thank you for that. I have a question here from Dora. Thank you, Dora, for this question. I think this is a question for all of us, really. She'd like to ask how autism and sleep might affect other family members, including siblings. So, Sophia, for example, did your sleeping issues perhaps impact on your brother Nick that we had on as a special guest last month? We didn't ask him that, did we? Should have. Yeah.
No, I don't think it impacted Nick too much, because he seems to sleep really well. Maybe more of an impact on my mum, who, especially when I was younger, had to also be up because couldn't be left sort of wandering around the house all night. But as I've got older, it's easier for me to manage my own kind of times of being awake. I don't need to go and disturb anybody else that's sleeping. So less so now, but as a child, I imagine my mum lost a lot of sleep trying to get me to sleep.
See, I think I've read some research that does state, though, that siblings can be more likely affected, through what they're experiencing, what they're hearing, and as a result, struggling perhaps with their sleep. I guess it's going to vary from person to person. I think there is some research that suggests that it does increase the risk for the wider family, which is a problem, isn't it? Because that can affect, family dynamics, resilience, and so forth. I know for my children, so I've got 2 autistic children and 1 neurotypical child, and I think for my neurotypical child, he was disrupted by my autistic son's sleeping issues. And that was a problem, because he'd go into school a bit more tired than perhaps he might have otherwise been. And I think that contributed to his sort of some of his moods, or perhaps being upset with his brother. It's such a difficult one, isn't it? Any thoughts on that, Ellie?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that obviously my son's a twin, so she likes to sleep. As I say, she'll get off to sleep and then he'll come up like an hour or 2 hours later, cranks up the music and obviously wakes her up, which she's not too happy about, and it is quite difficult to wake her up in the morning. So I do agree that it does disrupt to a certain extent. There is a kind of ripple effect for other people sleeping. So, and if we talk about sleep hygiene and how important it is, it does affect your daily functioning the next day.
So sleep hygiene, that's an interesting term that you use there. Let's go to Georgia on this one. What is sleep hygiene, Georgia?
Yes, so there are specific rules that people have seen that for typical population, if you like, into some kind of rules that are very generalized, in my opinion, that tend to work. So there are some rules like, lowering the temperature or having a very relaxing bath before you go to bed, that can actually promote a better night of sleep. And for many people, that can work. I think it is important to think if that works and for who, particularly when we look about autistic people. So, having a dark room, lowering your temperature generally are really, really good sleep hygiene rules that might support sleep. But it is important to work out sleep routines and rules that work out for you, even if that is different from the general sleep advice. And that is particularly relevant for autistic people because the general sleep hygiene has been written by non-autistic people for non-autistic people. So, sometimes maybe as parents, as carers, as supporting adults around the autistic person, we might try to enforce a rule that might actually feel very aversive to the autistic person. Sophia mentioned earlier, she liked, if I understood well, a specific set of pajamas. Is that predictability of the texture, of the smell, that can be very relaxing for some autistic people. Physical activity is another sleep hygiene rule. Generally, it's really good. It does lower the cortisol. That's the hormone of stress in our body. And the lower is our cortisol, the higher is melatonin, that we mentioned is the hormone of sleep. Now, traditional sleep hygiene says about not exercising close to the time that you're going to sleep. But in my research, I interviewed 54 autistic teenagers, and I heard lots of stories about how some autistic people needed to play very fast drums or to go for a run late at night, and that helped them to clear their mind, to unwind the mind and go to sleep. So it is important to personalize the routines, choosing things that feel, taste, smell, and sound good, because that's going to help autistic young people, but also autistic people of all ages, to feel relaxed and safe before they go to bed. So special clothes or the smells of the clothes, specific toys or objects, eating certain foods, wearing comfortable clothes, putting things along the edge of the bed or blocking out noises. Some people might like to use a fan, for example, on. Personalizing. What's going to work for me might not work for you, and that's okay.
Yeah, such good advice. The need to experiment and personalise. I think Ellie was making the point about that earlier, that she'd had to do that, and that you found it quite hard, perhaps, because I suppose we're all brought up being that we're all Greek here, I can only speak for myself, but, I was brought up with, certain traditional beliefs that certain routines should be followed, prior to bed. And I think, that's the way that we think, that's our approach. That's what makes sense to us. So I think it's hard. It could be very stressful and anxiety provoking for families to have to attempt to experiment. And, that also, I suppose, invites judgment. If you're a parent and you're allowing your child to do what sounds perhaps a bit strange to other families, but actually it works for your autistic child, you're sort of potentially inviting negative judgments from other friends and family, and that's hard, isn't it? What do you think about?
I think it's really important. What? Sorry, Georgia, go on.
No, it's very hard because if you think about our Greek families and our extended Greek families, everybody as well is having an opinion on how, how much you need to sleep, and you don't spoil the person, or, where's the boundaries and who is deciding. And I think it's very easy to feel sometimes a failure when someone is handing you a rule with sleep rules, right? Because that's the first type of advice that you get from your GP when you say, my child is struggling to sleep, or I struggle to sleep. And you get these rules. And I remember this young person that I had interviewed that told me that he had lots of fights late at night with his mom because he liked to crunch lots of ice cubes. And the mom was embarrassed. She was like, how am I going to go to the doctor? What am I going to say, that I'm allowing you to have ice cubes late at night? That you're going to get sick, your throat is going to hurt. But actually, it was very important for that young person to have that plain taste, that cold temperature as well, that was helping his body to relax, and the repetitive sound and movement of the mouth crunching the ice cubes, in order to unwind the mind and have a good night of sleep.
Yeah. So what exactly? So, really, again, reinforcing the point that whatever it takes to make it work for your particular child or for yourself is the key, really, ultimately. And to push through, no matter how perhaps strange it may seem to outsiders who aren't in your world. It's it's not really fair to judge if you're not in somebody else's shoes. But yeah, okay, so a reminder that if you'd like to send us your question, please text it through. The number is 0737 661 1033. That's 0737 661 1033. So we've only got a few more minutes left. So there's one issue that we haven't discussed so far, which I think is very important here, which is the role of anxiety and also trauma in impacting sleep. Now, we know from the research, lots of research tells us that autistic people are much more likely to experience high levels of anxiety and even PTSD, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder. So, of course, this is going to impact also on sleeping issues, isn't it? Because I think, as we discussed earlier, it's so crucial to sort of try and unwind up until the point you fall asleep. So, Georgia, have you got anything that you'd like to highlight on the importance of or perhaps the links between anxiety and sleep?
Yes, thank you so much. I guess, as we said, some sleep difficulties might be to different aspects of our sleep architecture or different levels of hormones that we have or we don't have. But definitely there's something about the social expectations and how we meet them and how much we might worry for them, especially when we are neurodivergent. There is some research that is suggesting that anxiety can affect the rapid eye movement, the REM sleep that I mentioned earlier, the stage where you have vivid dreams. And for example, if you have anxiety, these dreams may be very disturbing, or they can even turn into nightmares that can wake us up and interrupt our sleep, or can make the sleep so fragmented that then you don't get to wake up refreshed, and that has an impact again on your memory and other functions. Just as anxiety can affect sleep, it's worth it to say that sometimes it's unclear. Sometimes you might just have a sleep problem, and because you don't sleep well, your anxiety might get higher, and then you have both, and each one is feeding each other, if that makes sense. When it comes to autistic people, we need to think of an autistic child being in a mainstream school, for example, try to follow all the different rules, trying to do so many things, and sometimes that might mean that they don't have enough chances to exercise, they don't have enough friendships or relationships that they find calming, containing. So all of these environmental issues can actually raise anxiety levels, which then do have an impact on sleep. When it comes to trauma,
Sorry, Georgia, to interrupt, just because we're slightly low on time. I just think everything you said there is absolutely spot on. That, you know, it's all interlinked, isn't it? The environmental issues, the stress during the day. You know, if you're having challenges at school, it's going to impact on your sleep. But then, you know, if you're having poor sleep, then that increases the risk of anxiety the following days. But Sophia, does this resonate with you? I mean, if you had a poor night's sleep, would that then increase your anxiety the following day?
Yeah, I can relate to that sleep cycle problem where I'll be really anxious about going to sleep, and then I won't sleep a lot, and then the next day I'm more anxious, and then I can't sleep, and then it goes round and round. And I always feel like this pressure of, if I go to sleep now, I'll get 5 hours, or if I go to sleep now, I'll get 4 hours. And I'm so kind of worried about getting what I think is the right amount of sleep that then I can't sleep. But I also relate to what Georgia said about sort of the environmental school stuff. Like during the day, when I go to sleep, a lot of the times I'll kind of re-go over the interactions that I've had during the day and think, did I handle that situation properly? Did I make enough eye contact? Does this person think I'm strange? Does this, and kind of it goes over and over. And then once I've got over sort of replaying my day, I'm then trying to predict the rest of the week. So it's just like a never-ending cycle of being anxious and then not being able to sleep, and then being more anxious and drinking too much coffee, which then makes you even more anxious and less likely to sleep.
Can I just quickly say, you've just triggered something for me, Sophia. So before my son sleeps, he will go through the day. So it's a process of, he will regurgitate everything that's happened. So I give him the space to do that. So that's also his routine, to go through and process what's gone on, and also allow him the time to be able to do that. I think that's important for him. And sometimes his anxiety is framed around, oh my goodness, I don't have enough time to do that, and you're going to force me to go to sleep. So I've extended that, and I've allowed him that space to be able to process what he needs to and not stress him. Can you?
Yeah, I think that's one of the maybe key things about sleep and autistic people, is to try and have that bit of flexibility. Obviously try all the different ways of trying to get to sleep and recognise that some things might work and some things might not, but also to try and be a bit flexible to work out what's the best thing for that particular person.
Yeah, so I suppose to summarise then, in terms of what's going to help autistic people, I suppose anybody really, exploring and experimenting with confidence and belief that this is something you need to do and that you should push through and do it regardless of external judgments. I think that's an important one. Perhaps a little bit being sort of a little bit easy on yourself in terms of expectations. You know, perhaps you might not get it completely right initially, but if you see even a little bit of progress, to go down that road. And of course, the sensory issues is a big one, to understand how the sensory sensitivities and processing plays into it. And then, as we said about anxiety and trauma, and processing the day can help, as you said, Ellie, and the links there. So all really, really useful stuff. Georgia, it's been so great having you on. Could you perhaps point our listeners to any relevant online resources that you think that they or their autistic family member might find useful if they're experiencing sleep-related problems?
Thank you so much. So, the Group for Research in Relationships and Neurodiversity at UCL, University College London, and my page at UCL, if someone Googles my name and puts UCL, it's going to give access to people to some free resources. Recently, we worked with more than 50 autistic adolescents and clinicians at Kent who work at NHS, and we co-created together some very simple resources that are easy to download. There are some videos, some flyers for all of those who support autistic people as well as autistic people themselves. It's very simple advice about reinforcing that notion of personalizing, respecting how your mind and your body works, and be curious and have open and curious conversations with professionals about what might work.
Thank you so much. And how can listeners get in touch with you, just very quickly? And I'm sure you're happy for listeners to reach out, right? I assume.
Yes. So I'm very active on Twitter at Joe Pavlopoulou, GOPAVLOPOULOU, and my research team at UCL is also on Instagram and on Twitter. On Twitter at GRRAND_team.
All right, thank you so much. So next month we're going to be talking about something very important, which is making MRI scans more accessible to autistic people, because currently MRI scans can be very, very difficult and almost impossible sometimes to go through if you're an autistic person. So it's a really important discussion that we're going to have with Dr. Christina Malamatenyu from City University, who's one of the leading experts in this area. That show is going to be on the 2nd of March at 7 p.m, which, as always, is the first Thursday of the month. I'd also like to remind everybody that we have many regular community cafes that you can find out about if you visit our website, which is londonautismgroupcharity.org. Thanks again to my amazing co-hosts, Sophia and Ellie, and our fantastic expert guest today, Georgia, and all of you lovely listeners. Thank you very much and have a good month.
Thank you.
You're listening to London Greek Radio, and the programme you just heard had previously been broadcast, providing you with the opportunity to listen again to a show which you may have missed on LGR.